Welcome to the Second Bite Podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome back to the Second Bite Podcast. Today, I have the wise and powerful Jon Morris with us. Jon, so happy that you could be here today.
So glad to be here. I don't know if I go with wise and powerful, but hardworking at least.
We will let the listeners decide.
Yeah.
We've got a lot to talk about. You did a great transaction with Rise. You built Rise into a powerhouse that is still very effective in Chicago today. Before we jump in, I just want our sponsors are the people at TriVest. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're out of Miami.
No.
They're a great private equity group. They've been around for 30 some odd years. They're always on the list of founder-friendly private equity groups. They're on the Inc. list and the rest. Good group of people. They've got 3 funds down there. They support founders and family-owned businesses in many ways with a really good team. And they support us here at the podcast. So shout out to them to say thanks.
Awesome. Appreciate it as well.
Jon, I'm excited to jump in. I will reiterate my statement of wise and powerful. Wise people can determine. Powerful specifically because you took an agency, Rise Interactive, from start to a significant company, and then you sold it to a public company. So can you just describe maybe elevator pitch on who Rise is, who it serves, and a little bit of that early part of the journey?
Absolutely. So Rise Interactive is ranked by Forrester as one of the top performance-based marketing agencies in the world. And it's been recognized by Forrester for many, many years. And generally serves enterprise customers, helps them with their digital media, their analytics, and their creative and web development work. They today, I think, are around 350 employees. I don't know the exact count. When I exited a couple of years ago, they were around 250 employees. So you can see they've grown pretty substantially after I left as well. I went to University of Chicago for business school. I entered an annual business plan competition in 2004. I took second place. Still incredibly bitter. It should have been first.
Do you know what happened to that first place guy?
You know what? We are outperforming the first place company. So I feel good about that at least.
Well done.
We won $10,000, and that was my seed money to start Rise. So I basically started this out of my home, living in a 1,300 square foot studio, $10,000 in my pocket, grew the company. Up till around 2016, it was completely bootstrapped. That original $10,000 is what fueled the growth of the business. We took a minority investment from a company at the time called Quad Graphics. They've rebranded as Quad, the largest printer in the United States. And then based on the amazing experience I had with them from 2016 to 2018, they took majority ownership in 2018. I was then put on earnout, and I exited in 2020.
Great summary. So let's, for this podcast, we focus more on kind of transactions and what that's like. The growing and building it, I know, is a tremendous story that we don't have time for.
Yeah,
that's what you do today, right? You've created a new company that focuses on taking not just agencies, but other businesses through that same journey. Is that right?
Nope. We work exclusively with agencies.
Okay.
And what we do is we basically become their outsourced finance department. And that entails what I'll call the boring stuff of finance, which is the accounting. So like invoicing, payroll, month-end close, to the more strategic, which is putting your strategic plan together, your annual budget together, your cash flow analysis, your insights by margin, by client, by revenue, or by client or service. And really, if you think about it, all you have is time and money. And how you spend your time and money is really what's going to differentiate you between one company and the next. the way that you structure your finances and get things into your budget is really going to be that big differentiator. And so we provide that arm to it. And then we provide it's a technology play that we're building technology. We provide a ton of benchmarking analysis that really gives you an idea of how are you doing against your peer set.
But John, I'm smiling because we do that similar, not in as much detail as you do, but we do that when we work with a client, and now it's time to prepare them to present to somebody that's going to be an acquirer.
Yep.
Every single time they say to me, "Wow, I know more about my business now. I should have done this a couple years ago. I mean, I should have." It's so instructive. I see so much now. Do you get that a lot from people?
All the time.
Yeah.
And, it's generally, and by the way, we hear this comment a lot. Like, I have an amazing CFO or I have an amazing accountant. And generally, what I've learned about that statement is they very well might have an amazing accountant, but that accountant primarily focuses on tax. And what we want to focus on is really, how do you determine the goals of your business and get them into your budget, ensure that you have enough cash and that you have the insight so that you're providing the right services to your clients, that I believe that when our clients come to you, Todd, and they're ready for a transaction, you're going to be so impressed that the data room and building their books and their financials is going to be easy because all the insights have already been done. And that's what's allowed them to meet with you so that they could have the exit that they're looking for.
And they're going to do all the work and pay all the money all at the end. Just seems kind of silly when you think about it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do it all along the way.
Exactly.
So now let's go, if we can, let's go back to 2016.
Yep.
And if it's okay, let's go back to whatever the time period was when Quad knocked on your door. Give me an idea of how big you were, but Quad's not in your business. Quad's a printer, and that's old world, super dull and boring.
Yep.
So tell me about what was going on in your mind before that happened, that you would even have a conversation with them.
Absolutely.
Then,
so our revenue when we did that transaction, it's in the ballpark, but it should be right around 19 million a time in terms of our net income when we took the deal with Quad.
And if we go back to 2016, that is a big digital marketing firm.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so we decided that we wanted to do three things to fuel the growth of the business. We wanted to invest in technology, we wanted to invest in sales, and we wanted to invest in marketing. And we simply did not have enough capital based on our current profit and where the business was to invest in all three.
Because you're a services business, so you got to hire enough people to keep up with the work, and the agency's growing rapidly and everything else, right?
Exactly. So we hired a CTO. We started hiring people for the building of technology. Building technology is expensive, and so we needed capital infused into the business. We originally went the private equity route and looked at, going that route.
Did you hire somebody to help you manage this process, or you knew enough people and you did it on your own?
I think a better way of saying it is I was naive enough to not understand how much work it was to do it on my own.
Right.
So we did do it on our own. But I'll say that, like, rather than hiring someone to help me with the process, it became my full-time job. So not only do you have to put the data room together, but a lot of people do not want to invest in service-oriented businesses and take a minority stake. So you have to have a very thick skin and get a lot of no's and pound the phone fairly regularly to find the right partner and the right investor.
And part of the danger that you just touched on quickly, you said it became your full-time job. If it doesn't become your second full-time job, then your revenues slow or go down, which hurts the value of the enterprise.
Absolutely. Like I without a doubt worked longer hours, but I would say that in terms of my impact to other components of the business, it got watered down for about a year. It took a
Wow.
long time to put the transaction together. Um, now,
How did you
but
go from talking to private equity guys? How did Quad even get on your radar?
so there was a person named Eric Ashworth who right now runs the entire agency practice at Quad. Uh, and met him, had a great relationship with him.
And who's
He
that? Can you say?
what?
Who is that?
Eric Ashworth. So he runs the entire agency practice at Quad.
And you knew him.
I knew him from his previous job.
Got it.
Uh, he actually was basically saying, like, look, we want to talk to you. Like we are really interested. People don't realize it, but I believe Quad today is the 16th largest agency in the world.
Yeah, very quietly, right?
Yep. Um, and that's all under his leadership and Joel, the CEO's leadership of, having the vision of, as you said, printing. There's always going to be a need and a value for printing, but it is in a revenue declining industry, and they are looking to make investments in industries that are growing at a much more rapid rate. And so they had the vision to not just acquire Rise, but they acquired an agency called Periscope and an agency called Ivy, and they've put a pretty big practice together. And they already had a practice called Blue Soho, so they brought them all together. Um, so what made sense and what was interesting is Quad has some of the largest clients in the world. They They're the core business. They have a large sales force. They have access to all the way to the CEOs and CMOs of some major corporations. And so when you think about going the private equity route as opposed to the strategic route, you know, you absolutely get on the private equity route uh, understanding of financial disciplines, operational excellence in terms of how you run your business. They most likely can make intros for you. Like, there is huge value in the right private equity partner. Um, but a lot of them are not going to have a sales force that can bring business to you. A lot of them are not going to have, legacy accounts of brands that you would be dying to work for. And so that was the part that really excited me about Quad and why I thought the partnership made a lot of sense.
And they saw enough, I guess, that they liked about you, that they were willing to do a minority investment, which means they trusted you enough. But they
Yep.
also probably, I would guess, wanted to test the waters to see if we really brought digital to printing clients, if that would really take or not.
Yep. Exactly. I think they were very prudent. They're very smart. And by the way, you know, starting a company from scratch
It's
and
hard.
growing it, well, it's not only hard, it becomes a part of you. It's your baby, and it's scary when you, even at a minority investment, it's like, I now have a fiduciary responsibility to these people, and I care about these people. Um, you hear horror stories about like who the buyer might be. What I absolutely love about Quad is they just are flat out wonderful people. You
That
know,
helps a lot, right?
they lived by every single promise they made. You couldn't ask for a better partner in crime to be by your side, and so I feel very fortunate that they're the ones that I chose to do this deal with.
Did they tell you up front that in 2 years they want to come back for a bigger chunk, or just grew that way?
No, I mean, at that moment in time, I was pretty clear that, I know that if they're going to take an investment, there has to be an exit at some point. So my original exit strategy was I was going to die one day, and uh, and I thought I would run the business forever. And but I understood that by choosing to take capital, I needed to have a different exit strategy because it's not fair to them if they're going to put, a substantial amount of money into the business, uh, that we're not going to give them a chance to make a great return off that investment.
And you know what? That I think is a great indicator of a good partner, being you in this case. Goes to the wise part I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Is to know that you've got to consider your partner, right? You don't
Yep.
take advantage of a partner because you have perhaps majority control of the enterprise, right?
Yep.
Now, take me. So you had 2 good years, right?
Yep.
You were roughly 19, 20-ish million bucks in 2016. Two
Yep.
years later, I would imagine the investment that you made in marketing and sales and the rest has really now elevated the business in 2018. Tell me how the conversation came up about acquiring all of the business and what that was like.
Look, we've had our 2-year trial working together. We clearly, as you can tell, I think the world of them. I think they think the world of me. And we see the value and the synergies of where we can go. And I talked to Joel, and I talked to the leadership team, and I talked to Eric, and we ended up, I I think it was a mutual decision that it made sense to do. And so the other thing when you think about it is I didn't approach someone like you or shop it around. Like, when you find the people that you think are amazing partners, um, you know, uh, you you don't need to do that.
I completely agree.
They're
So now,
honest, they're fair. They treated me very fairly. The deal was a very good deal for me.
and did
I
they
think
just buy the rest of the company, John? Did they just write you a check and that was it?
no, there was an earnout. So, I won't go
So,
into
so
specifics.
hold
Yeah.
on just one sec. So 2020, they write a check.
No,
Oh, sorry, 2016,
2018, they
they
take
write a
majority
check.
ownership.
They've
There's a
got minority, and you can use this money. You probably took some off the table, but now you've got money to develop your technology, your sales and marketing.
exactly. So they invested more in the business, and then, the earnout was actually a longer period of time. So I left the earnout earlier than I think they wanted or I wanted, and there were some personal reasons that really drove that decision.
So in
Uh,
2020, they bought the rest of the company, some
yeah.
in cash and then some in earnout.
So 2018 was, they took majority control. They put money in at that moment in time.
Okay.
And then, the intent was for me to stay, and my intent was to stay for indefinite period of time. Uh, I I ended up exiting in 2020, um, and left my earnout early, uh, by a couple of years. So it was a 4 to 5 year earnout. And the main reason was more personal than it had to do with Quad or the transaction itself.
And so I assume because of that, it makes separating a little bit easier, right?
Yep.
And
Um,
they're good people, they're respectful of that and on and on.
yes, I think they were respectful. I think they understood the decision making, and and so that was kind of the impetus of the reasons why I chose to do it.
And so I'm curious, they're a public company. Did
Yeah.
did the notion, because we talk about this a lot on the podcast, was the notion of equity ever introduced? You would take a chunk of shares as part of your compensation or part of the payment for the company?
One of the things I think Quad does a great job of is they want to make sure that the investment plays out and that they do a really good job with the investment. So, uh, in this scenario, it was all tied to the performance of Rise. They did a great job of leaving Rise alone. And so, at that moment in time, it was not tied to any of the equity side of Quad. It was really designed based on the performance of Rise.
Got it. And is there anything about your earnout? So, typical earnout, they'll tie it to revenue, gross margin, EBITDA. I assume you had some tie like that. Was there anything that you can comment on that as you look back, you feel like, man, I probably should have structured this a little differently, or maybe this one worked really well for me?
So what was interesting about the earnout was it was a multiple of EBITDA, and the multiple got higher every single year. And then on their side, um, and I don't want to, I don't know what I can say confidentially or not in terms of all the structure of the earnout, but I was incentivized to stay longer, and it was a really well thought out earnout.
Did it was there any function that made the EBITDA go higher? Was it the fact that your EBITDA was growing, or they just wanted you to stay each
So
year?
it's a couple things. I'm incentivized to grow the EBITDA because, it's based on that earnout, and then, the multiple also gets higher as you go along. So I understand that if I stay longer, that becomes, um, powerful. Now, what did become challenging is we did very well in the earnout, and the EBITDA continued to grow. And as the EBITDA grew and the multiple grew, I cared a lot about the downside and protecting the downside. And that's something that I would just say in that structure you have to think about if you're, you know, uh, if you're on the buy side, how you want to make sure that you're thinking about both elements. Does
Yeah,
that make
so
sense?
was there friction around John's not investing enough in the business to
Not at
preserve the
not at
EBITDA?
all. I was
No?
very, very, as I said, like my goal, like I am hoping to this day that they make $1 billion off of this deal. Uh, I've heard of stories before where someone sold the company to someone else, and then they got a nice check, and then later down the road, the company they sold made a massive amount of money,
Yeah.
and the original founder was really upset. I will not be upset at all. If they sold this for $1 trillion, I would be ecstatic. I wouldn't feel like, uh, I wouldn't feel like they didn't take care of me. They took care of me and they were awesome. So, um, I don't remember the original question. Does that
Yeah,
answer
so
it?
it was just what was the function of that going higher? Was it strictly like
It's
in
just
your
it's just time. So, every year the multiple goes up, and then it's whatever the EBITDA is on a 12 months trailing basis.
so then
So,
tell me
the question was, did we invest in the business? So,
yeah.
yes. You also hear these stories of like they get rid of like every single person in every single department, and
Juice the EBITDA. Yeah.
yeah, and I was like, I that's just not who I am. We grew our investments in technology every year. We grew our investments in sales and marketing every year. We invested to fuel the growth of the business. You
And
know,
so you did the second part of the transaction back in a time when people would actually gather together to work, right? In a shared location.
yeah.
After the transaction was done, what do you think changed the most for you? Was it just a mental adjustment? Because I know you still had your same team, same office, same everything. Was it a mental adjustment mostly, or was there procedural things that you had to get used to?
Well, there was a couple things. The first thing is I decided in October of 19 I was going to step down. Okay. The only one that knew was my wife.
Okay.
Um, I told Quad in January of 2020 that I was going to step down. I announced to the company on March 2nd that I was stepping down as CEO. And then on April 1st, I turned the reins over to Larry, who's the current CEO. The 6 months between October and April were horrible for me. Uh, Fears about telling people, desire to tell people, your life is in limbo because you can't tell anybody like what's going on in the world. I'll tell you a funny story. A friend of mine sold his company right around the same time, and um, and it was two partners, and one partner stayed on as the CEO, and the other partner stepped down. And I was sitting there, I was talking to the two of them. They have no idea what I'm about to do. And they're like, we originally thought that the person staying on as a CEO was going to be miserable. And it's like, but it turned out it was like the other way around. Like that other person didn't have anything to do. And I was like, well, that's about to be me. And I was like, that's not a comforting story. And so anyway, that was a high anxiety period. I then also, I stepped down in the middle of the pandemic. You have this vision and dream of traveling or doing cool things, all those dreams get shut down because every golf course is closed, the airports are closed, can't even buy toilet paper at that time period. I have 3 little kids. We're all under one roof. So I think that was the impetus to starting Ramsay a little bit earlier than I probably normally would have.
When did that idea bubble up for you, Ramsay?
Say it again.
When did the idea of Ramsay bubble up for you?
Probably around May which is when I started it. I was meeting with a friend of mine and who was in the life insurance space, and I really liked him a lot. And I was giving him guidance, like, why don't I get into executive coaching? Which was the original idea, was to teach small businesses how to grow faster. And, eventually I grew it to, focus more on the finance management side because that seemed to be what was resonating. So people loved our budgeting process and the insights they were getting from the finance side. So we decided to double down on that.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer comes down to, I don't know if I'm all in on Ramsay. I'm working my butt off around the clock. And so I think that made the transition a lot easier for me because I don't have to sit around and think about, all the great glory days of Rise and what's going on there. I talk to Larry, the current CEO, at least weekly, if not more frequently. So, I get a lot of insights in terms of just, how Rise is doing and the good things that are going on there. So I would say that I absolutely miss working with some of the amazing people I worked with, but because Ramsay's doing so well and I love the culture and the people I have at Ramsay, it's made that transition easier.
Yeah, that's great. So 2 last questions. First one is, it feels like there's a lot of CEOs, and this is certainly not wrong, but they would probably judge your decision and say, that's a foolish decision by Jon because he could have got more.
Yep.
In a different way. And you seem to be not losing a moment's sleep over that. Have you processed that at all? And how would you comment about that?
Look, as I said, there was a personal reason that I needed to do it. And I think that if you had all the context, it would be a no-brainer decision for every CEO.
And so I don't mean necessarily you leaving. I mean you selling to a group that, without going out to the market, without testing, without squeezing every last dollar, that kind of thing.
Okay. Oh, you know what? When you have a great partner that has a great deal, yes, you are right. Maybe there could have been an opportunity to make more money. But at the end of the day, you want to wake up every day and work with people you love. And, could I have found somebody that would have paid more? Probably. You never know. But I'm just saying, like, it's very possible. But who am I working with every day? They're a known entity. I know that I can trust them. I know that they're good people. Like that, there's a lot of value in that.
I got to tell you, you say that, and everybody agrees with that. In practice, people don't always apply that. But I hear from people, fortunately not on our transactions, but on others, that say, geez, if I could trade 5% or 10% of the haul I got, to work with people I love and respect and would never have to worry about. In hindsight, I would do that 100% of the time.
The other thing that I would just say is Quad is a very fair partner. You know what I'm saying? Like they put deals together that, you talked about, I forget the sponsor's name,
My best.
Yeah, Trivest. You talked about how they're incredibly founder friendly, right?
Right.
Quad is incredibly founder friendly.
Yeah.
And so uh, they put deals together where they want you to do well.
And those are always the best deal. They're better for the buyer when they create a good deal for the seller, right?
Yeah, and if you look at it, Rise has grown fairly substantially since I left over the last 2 years, right? So, whatever valuation they got, the company's grown, the technology is better, the brand is bigger, so their investment's paying off.
Yeah, that's great. So to wrap up, let me ask you this. You've been very successful, right, in your personal life, also in your family life,
Yep.
and in the community. When you look back, is there one or two things that you would point to, either a book that you've read or currently reading, or a mentor or an experience that really shaped who it is that you are today?
I have a lot of mentors. One of them is Jack Kraft, the former vice chairman and chief operating officer of Leo Burnett. He's been invaluable to me. I still talk to him multiple times a week. But he really helped guide me. There's someone who just told me recently about the agencies that do well versus the agencies that don't do well. And they had a great comment of most of the agencies that do well have surrounded themselves with some type of mentor that helped them and guided them. I had Cheryl Berman, the former chairman and chief creative officer of Leo Burnett on my advisory board. I have David Freeman, the former president of Razorfish on my advisory board. I learned a ton from Quad. I learned a ton from my leadership team. I've given a presentation recently where I talk about the success of Rise. And I have a slide on there, and these are all true facts, where one of them was I was failing every single class by Thanksgiving of my freshman year of high school. My 7th grade English teacher actually said I would never be able to write a complete sentence, let alone go to college.
Do you want to shout out to that teacher?
Well, you know what I will tell him is I have overachieved. Like I have learned how to write a complete sentence and I went to college. So I'm pretty proud of that overachievement. And the third thing I say is, and this is a true quote from me, my sophomore year of high school, was I'm okay as long as I get a D- in biology.
Tricky one, biology.
And the reason why I point that out is I am far from brilliant. Okay. I'm incredibly hardworking, but what I would say is I don't even know if I have an original bone in my body, like or original thought. What I am my secret weapon is I am a great listener. And I trust people who have been there and done it. And rather than try and reinvent the wheel, I take a playbook that's been proven and worked.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, that's a great kind of segue into exactly what you're doing now at Ramsay, right? For those that want to listen and want to benefit from that.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at Quad, like one of the things that I think is amazing is they're the largest printer in the United States. Any magazine you read, they basically print.
Right.
And I think part of the brilliance of what they've done is their financial management practice. Like they are so good at managing their finances.
I got to tell you, as an outsider and a shout out to Quad, there's another great printing company called Hart Hanks.
Yep.
They printed every single paper check in America forever.
Yep.
They have relationships with every small business in America.
Yep.
They're 1/5 the size of Quad because they just never realized what they had and managed it in a way like Quad did. And perhaps we're fortunate enough to partner with the wise and powerful Jon Morris.
Well, I appreciate it. The wise and powerful. And by the way, I did get that D- in biology. So
congrats. Well, that's what got you here, man. And so I will say this for anybody listening. In the if you've heard this, we're on all the major platforms, John. But if you go to secondbitepodcast.com, you can look up Jon Morris. You can look up this episode on the notes. There's a link to Ramsay. There's a link to your LinkedIn profile. You can also go to, what is it, Ramsay
Innovations.com, RAMSAY Innovations.com. You can email me at jon@RamsayInnovations.com. If you're an agency, I can tell you this, I sincerely care. I want you to do really well. I want you to manage your money intelligently, and I want you to spend your time and money in areas that will help you grow. I'd love to get to know you, and potentially help you.
And I will say, it's what I find for most of the the agencies that I get to work with, they're kind of cut from the same mold, right? They're scrappers, they're hard workers. Maybe they're a little bit more on the creative side. A lot of them are less on the finance side. And if they could just plug that into their brain at the cost point that you're doing it, at the level you're doing it, I think anyone that looks at it would say, geez, man, this is an easy one for me to decide on.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing as generously as you have. That's greatly appreciated. And it's been wonderful having you on with us, John. Thank you.
Absolutely. Todd, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.